Hello, welcome again. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. Happy Mother's Day. I hope our youth kids have something great for their mothers. I know they did. Hello again. For those of you guys who don't know me, my name is David. I serve here as a youth director since last October, I believe. And today, PG had to be out of town, so about 2 weeks ago, he asked if, I already shared my testimony with youth group once, and he asked if I could share with Leanne, so here I am today. So for past week, I've been praying, and I called my father the first thing because he's pastor as well, out in Korea. So I said, Father, and he said, what's going on? Is something wrong? I said, no. I said, well, PG's going to be out of town, and and he asked me to share the testimony. And I was like, I'm really nervous because I've always sort of I did campus ministry. I've talked to younger kids, but never in front of adults. So I'm thinking, wow, how am I going to do this? But my father just said, hey, just talk about God's love. You're here because of that. Just share. So I said, okay, Dad, just pray for me, and he was just like, just be honest, whatever happens, just be honest. So here I am. Again, most of you guys know me because I grew up in Richmond. I served RK in high school as a KM adult service pianist for a while, and after that I went off to college, and I was out for about 6-7 years, I believe, and now I'm back here because my family were in town, and they went back to Korea last October, but ever since then I've been here and serving and so on. But throughout those 6-7 years of time when I was away from here, boy, I went through so many things. And later on that, of course I'm going to share a lot, but throughout my testimony, one thing that I want you guys to consistently think about is that we know that God loves us so much. That's not even a question, right? And also that I'm pretty sure that you guys do as well. But my question to you is, how much do you love God? How much do you love God? And also my next question that I want you guys to always be thinking about is, do you love God based on the knowledge that you know of Him, or do you truly love Him out of your own heart? I grew up, of course, because my father's pastor, I grew up as a pastor's kid, which means that every Sunday I went to church, every 새벽 기도 I went, every Friday service I was there, every Wednesday service I was there. Why? Because I was the only pianist at the church at the time. So I had to be there no matter what. I got up, sometimes I would act like I was sick, I'm sick around 5:55, for 새벽 기도. My mother would call me 100 times. I'm like, where are you? Calm down. It's like, I'm sick, Mom. She's like, you're lying, just calm down, So, like I said, I always grew up in church, listening to sermon all the time, reading the Bible, I knew who God was, but there was nothing but a knowledge. I wasn't really in other words, I didn't really know God truly out of my heart. And my mother would always used to tell me that, David, you have to be thankful for what God has done for you. Because when I was born, of course, we all experienced God's grace and love from the very day when we were born. But with my story, it has a little bit of different story behind it. What happened was my mother is, naturally, she's physically really weak. So even my grandfather was worried that when she brought my father to meet him before marriage, to introduce him, my grandfather was like, this is a really nice guy, but I'm really worried about you because you're physically so weak. How are you going to function as the role mother? And not only that, can you serve the family? All that, because she was physically weak. For instance, if we had people over to our house, right? My mother would cook and stuff, but with the time span of cooking 2 hours, she won't be able to move for the next 3 days. That's how weak she is. So because of that came into the problem when I was born. My mom lost so much blood that when I came out, that apparently, now I'm not a medical person. I'm a music person, so I'm not a medical person. But apparently when I came out, that I had no oxygen inside. And my aunt was actually a doctor who help my mom to go through all this. She didn't tell my mom, of course, but when she went up to my father, she told him that, hey, you guys are still young. Maybe, it's best idea for you to erase this boy. Because it would really affect my mom's life, right? And my heart wasn't fully formed, my brain wasn't fully formed. It was just problems everywhere. So my mom was telling my father that for sake of your wife, could we just erase this boy, But my father was at the he was very young, seminary student, And he was, of course, he still is, of course, but he was very fired up about God, he had so much passion for God. And he said, no, God will take care of it. God will take care of it. Take care of it. So he was the only guy who said no to this big problem. But that's why they couldn't get rid of me, because my father said no. So eventually I was born, and my father said that he thought it was a rock that came out from my mother, because when I came out, my body was entirely black. And, my father said, like, there was the only time in his Christian life, faith, where it was really, really, really tested of his faith. Because he told his aunt, my aunt, that, don't worry, God's got this, God's got this, he's going to take care of this. But when he actually saw one side, his own first son, coming out as a black body, and then he turns on the other side, he sees his very wife just losing blood left and right? So he's going, oh Lord, I'm going to lose both of them at the very first time, right? So for a second, he prayed to God, saying, God, if you let me lose both of my, my family members, I don't know what I'm going to do to you. That's what he thought, right? So what happened was, they put me in the incubator, right? And it turned out that, for the first 2 years of my life, I had to live in the hospital, under care. And for every day, for about 5 to 6 hours, my dad would put his hands inside the incubator and just pray. And he said he made that oath to God, saying that, God, if you let my first son to live, I will offer him to you. And this, for him, of course for all the parents it's a big deal, but for him it was even more, because my father is the first Christian ever in his family. So on the back of his mind, he was thinking, his other brothers and sisters would tell him, see, this is what happened because you're a Christian. This is a curse in the family. Look at your first son. So there were so many things that were going on in my father's head. But of course, I'm here today. I don't know. And of course, it's just really by grace of God that I'm alive, And so until this day, I'm 30. And by the way, as soon as I told my youth kids when I first came that I'm 30 years old, I'm sorry for, adults, but they were like, man, that's dirty. But anyways, by grace of God, I'm here. But every time, up until this day, whenever I go for like family reunion, people will come up to me and say, are you okay? Are you breathing okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm okay, I'm fine. And like, this past summer, last year, I took my parents out to Korea, and then I revisited some old, far extended family members that we haven't seen for a while. And they were seeing, they're like, boy, did you know that they had a funeral ready for you when you were born? Of course, I didn't know this because my mother told me when I was 16. She showed me baby diaries and all that. And when I actually went to Korea this summer, my 작은 외할아버지, right? He showed my grandfather, right? Showed me all these pictures they had. Like apparently one of the uncles decided to take pictures of what was going on. So I've heard about stories obviously, but for the picture-wise, it was the first time I ever seen it. And it was just surreal. I was just like, whoa. But then I was just like, I gotta be careful because I didn't want to make it like a false statement saying I was dead but I'm alive again. But again, my point is, from day one when I was born, our family really, really experienced God's love and God's grace. And from that point on, it was reassurance to my father as well, saying, when he prayed as a seminary student, two things that he heard was, there's nothing what God can't do, as long as you pray. And second thing was that, like what I read earlier in Proverbs, people's plan towards me was get rid of this boy, you know. But God had totally different plans, all right? So from then, my father really, really believed even more, saying, you know what? We have to be careful how we pray because, God really listens to our prayer. But anyways, that's how my baby life started. But when I was in Korea, I came to States when I was 11. And for first 11 years of my life in Korea, I don't know how many times we moved. We always moved every 2 years. One of the gifts that God gave to my parents were they were church planners. So they would start up a church, they would gather members of the church, they would train them, they would pray really hard for them. And when God told them it's time for you to go to a different city, that's what they did for 2 years. Which meant for myself and for my brother, it was really hard for us to settle down. By the time we had like someone of best friends, it was just like, okay, time for us to move somewhere else. Right? So it was, I don't know how many different elementary schools I went. I can't even count. So I was born in Seoul, but I ended up all the way down to Gangwon-do, and then I went to Pohang. It's like, for those of you who guys don't know the geography of Korea, look it up tonight. All the major cities that you could think of, there's always a small town outside of that, like Sikwon, right? All of them, I think I went about 60 of them in my life, I think. But that's how we grew up in Korea. Which meant, because of that, my parents were never home. It was just always myself and my brother. So we always had to sort of like spend our time by ourselves. And I remember my brother was like, do we have parents? Are they really our parents? Because they were never home. They were always busy. But one thing, all the business life they had, one thing my mother always, taught us hard was that, if you pray to God earnestly, there's nothing He can't do. But she would always say, what are your motives behind it? Why do you pray? Right? And she would, of course, always say, because of the fact that they were gone all the time, they're like, it's okay, God's with you all the time. And every time she walked out the door, she'd always say, oh, I see 7 angels behind you today. And we believed it. So in our house, we had 9 people when our parents were born, because 2 of us and 7 other angels, right? That's what we believed. We had 9 people in our house every day, right? And that's how we grew up. And my father, like I said, we were moving around a lot. And one time when I was 5th grade, that summer, he decided to go to a mission trip in Brazil and Amazon. So he went. And he came back after about being out there for 2 weeks, he decided that he wanted to study more in seminary. And by that time, we were the only family that were in Korea at the time. All my imo and samchon, they were all in either America or Europe. So we had this thing called, I don't know what it's called exactly, but it's like a family invitation visa thing, I think. And it was kind of coincident that my father decided to start praying about it from August of 1995, I believe. And when, in the midst of prayers, my mother told him and said, hey, I forgot to tell you, our visa expires on November 1st of this year. So my father said, this is fine, let's go. So we packed up everything, thinking that we're gonna spend in America for a couple months while my father could get ready for seminary school and all that. But then we'll just go because we have this visa alive, right? So we got everything ready within a month, okay? And we said bye to everyone, and we came to America here in Richmond because that's where my kunimong used to live. Now they're in Atlanta, and for those of you guys who know, Dennis Cho and my cousins, their family were here. Like Ray's father, right? Yeah, some of you guys know. They came. And so our family plan was that, hey, we don't know what's going to happen, but we really believe God's going to, allow my father to go back to seminary school and for him to study more, get ready for the next journey down the road with God. But within 2 weeks, he gets a call from Korea saying, hey, there's a Korean church down in Lynchburg, Virginia that's looking for a pastor. Could you go serve there? So we were like, where's Lynchburg? right? But it's just, for those of you guys who know Lynchburg, because, I mean, now it's pretty well known because of Liberty University and all that, you know. But back then, you know, like, yeah, I mean, Liberty University had been there for a while, but then it wasn't like big as today, you know, it wasn't a big of a town today. So within the first 2 weeks that we came to America, we were in Richmond, and my father agreed to go serve the church. And he thought it was a perfect fit because, again, when we were in Korea, they were basically church planners. And, you know, they needed someone to start the church. So we went. So first 5 years, we were there. But you know, I don't know if you guys know a whole lot about Lynchburg, but now there are so many Koreans because of students and everything. Back then, entire school, like student bodies in elementary school of like 300 kids, only Asians that you know, you could see are 3 average. There were me, my brother, and this guy named Gilbert Lee, who was the son of the deacons at our church. But he didn't really, you know how to speak Korean. So it was just my brother and I. My brother, he enrolled as a first grader, and I enrolled as a 5th grader. And I remember that first day when we went to school, my brother cried so much the police had to take him back to home because he was so scared. Second day school, now that I know, but I got suspended on second day. And you guys are looking at me like, what is this? What happened was that, you know, my parents, yeah, I told you, we moved to Lynchburg like 2-3 weeks into time spent on us being in America. My parents were still under, time zone thing. They were also tired, they were all very busy. So they had no time to go out and buy, American grocery store. So what do we eat? We ate whatever the chipsai they gave us, like kimchi and like all this Korean food, right? What did I eat before I went to school the first day? I ate Korean food. I went, guess what happened? Entire school, like, what is this smell? You know, for us, it's not bad, but for them who never had experience with the smell of Korean food, they might go a little, if they're not used to it. So what happened was during the recess, right? I mean, now I understand, because my principal back then became one of my brother's friend's father, best friend's father. So his name is Mr. Blake, and he told me the story later on. But what happened was, during the recess, I was out, playing with the kids. Well, I wasn't really playing with the kids because I was the only one. Of course, no one's gonna come play with me because I didn't know what we were saying. I was just there, and I see 2 boys walking up to me. And of course, I didn't know what they were saying because I didn't understand anything. They started saying stuff, and they started pushing me around here and there. You know what little boys do, they're teasing me, making fun of me, and this and that. And one of the guys actually punched me for whatever reason. And I remember one of the Jipsonim told me, of course in Korean, when I first visited the Lynchburg church, he said, hey, don't touch Americans, don't do anything, just if they say anything, just don't act anything, unless they punch you. So if they punch you, punch him back. So I remember that, right? But then I was debating whether I should really punch him or not, because I got hit at least 3 times, right? So I got so fed up with it, so I held my fist up like this, right? And I didn't hit him, but I was acting like I was about to hit him. But guess what? Police saw just me with a fist, not with those 2 boys. The police came and got 3 of us in the principal office. And principal knew, Mr. Blake knew that those 2 boys were troublemakers. But because he had to be fair, he ended up suspending all 3 of us. But little did I know, because I didn't understand anything about English at the time. All I remember was I just sat in front of the principal's office, and next thing I see police coming, right? And he escorted me back to home. I had no idea. Walked inside of the room, my parents were sleeping, because again, they were really tired. My mother was like, well, what are you doing here, right? And I was like, I don't know, they told me to go home. Right? And later I found out what happened, but that was my second day of experiencing American school. So because of that, I was really scared to go out and make friends for a while. As a 5th grader. So that's where, for those of you guys who know, that's where music came in for me. My mother's side, they're all musicians. I mean, the emo my aunt's family in London, they're known for being a really, really high, classical pianist. But my father wanted me to do music so that way that if they ever need someone to play praise songs in a church, I could fill in, because perfect because I'm a PK, Right, that's how it started. But when I was in Korea, for those of you guys who know about this system called Hagwon in Korea, right? It's not like one-on-one lessons like we have here. It's like you go there every day, you practice for 20 minutes, and teacher comes in for 10 minutes, and that's it, right? But you go in, why? Because, back in the day, I don't know if you guys know, but maybe the adults do, we used to play this thing called gonggi. Do you know what gonggi is? Right? You have I don't want to call it rocks, but you got a little round shape, rock-ish looking thing, and then you just toss up in the air, and you guys know what I'm talking about, gonggi, right? Man, boy, that was fun. That's the only reason why I went. and another thing called kusuri. That's the only reason why I went. And besides the fact that the piano teacher was the choir director at my father's church, I had to go. I had no choice. But I was like, I don't like music at all. I don't like it. But when I came to America, after all the experience that I had in school, music became my best friend because that was the only thing that I had. Somehow my mother found this old piano outside in the garage. And asked the apartment if someone's throwing it away, and they were like, yeah, I guess the person's moving, and it's so heavy for them to move. They're just throwing it out there. So she asked them if we could take it in, and we took it in, and that was my first piano. So what do? This is a little bit weird for the fifth grader, but I don't know, I did. What do you do as a fifth grader who has no friends, who are so scared of meeting new friends out there because of your experience in different country and different culture and school? Your mother gave you an instrument. So I used to play 6-7 hours a day just sitting down and just playing anything. Because that was my only way out to just spend time in a day. Right? Because I was so afraid to go outside. And I loved it. Because I felt like, I didn't start off playing classical music. It was all praise song, getting ready for church service and stuff like that. But of course, I'm not, even though people think I'm a singer because I have a low voice, but don't ask me to sing because I don't know how to sing. It's funny because later I will tell you, but it's funny because I also work at the VCU music department for voice coach right now, but I don't know how to sing. So later on, if you Google anything job description about voice coaching, right? As long as it's not voice teacher, it's totally different field. So again, don't ask me to sing, okay? If you ask me how to sing, right? I could tell you, but don't ask me to sing. But anyways, because of that, I would play the hymns, but because I didn't know how to sing, I would just recite the verses, right? And I would do that for 4 or 5 hours a day, right? And through that experience, I think God really tried to talk to me in that process. For those of you guys who says, oh, I don't know how to pray, or I don't know what to pray about, or oh, my heart is so hardened right now, I don't know how to start prayer. Open up a hymn book. I really encourage you all. Okay, just open up the hymn book, even if you don't know how to play the instrument or how to sing, just read it. Okay, because just like we know, the hymns are the words, musical prayers, right? So I really encourage you guys for that. But anyhow, that's how I started. And my parents saw me, as a fifth grader, spending 5-6 hours a day in piano. They were like, well, we have to get this guy a piano teacher. But they didn't have any money. That was a problem, right? So they were praying really hard for about a year, saying, God, we see a talent in David, We don't want typical Asian family, right? We don't want him to major in music. But, he shows a sign, so, could we afford him or somehow get him a piano teacher, right? Because we only had 3 Asians in the elementary school, I was able to learn how to speak English pretty fast, all right? So by the time when I became a 6th grader, I used to just always hang out at the music room, and then just play piano whenever I can, and our music director or teacher at the time came up and said, "Oh, you know how to play the piano?" And I said, "Yes." And they said, "Who do you study with?" And I told him that I don't have a piano teacher. I just play because I had little lesson when I was in Korea, but with the little knowledge that I have, I just try to just learn it by myself. And then he said, "Oh, okay, well, you know what, maybe I could, just get some names from my colleagues and see what I could do for you." And I stopped him as soon as he was about to leave the room. I said, "There's one thing you have to know." And he said, "What is it?" "My father is pastor." And he said, "Okay." And I said, "No, you don't understand." He said, "What's wrong?" I said, "We can't afford it." I mean, I'm not saying all pastors can't afford it, but for my position, I thought that was like the common thing to say. So I grabbed and I said, "We can't afford it." And then he gave me a little smile. He's like, "Okay, I understand." So he got back to me after 3 weeks, and I started this program where the city provides all the tuitions and pianos and all that stuff for some of the young kids who are really interested in music. I mean, they call it gifted, but I think it's all about interest, honestly. But that's how I started. So from there, that's how music came about in my life all the time, because I had to make some kind of friend, right? So after being in Lynchburg for about 4 years, my family got another call from God saying, "We want you to move to Silver Spring, Maryland." So we moved to Maryland. This time we didn't go as a church planner. In Lynchburg, we had to do everything. We had to rebuild the church, which meant, I had to carry around all this heavy duty stuff, build the church and here and there. But in Maryland, my dad got called to start a church that was already established about 20, 30 years ago. So we went. And that's where things got rough. Not all the big churches I know are like this, but there's saying that whenever the small town boy goes up to the city, they always tell them, "Be careful of those city people." Right. We went, and boy, they were rough. They were really rough. My father is very like all of you guys, very family oriented. So even in church, he loves having just fellowship all the time. Right? The church was modified church from a big house. And it had a big first floor, and second floor there were many rooms, right? So my father one day, after being there for about a year or so, told the elders saying, "Hey, why don't we just knock down all the walls in the basement so that way it could be big, one space where everyone could have fellowship with each other." But the elders took it wrong, saying, "Oh, this pastor doesn't trust us." It's weird how people come with different stories, right? And from there, they start saying, "We don't need pastors who doesn't trust us." Right? So what did they do? They started writing a petition saying, "We don't need him here anymore. Let's kick him out." That was after about a year of being there. And they said all these things about my parents. They just made up stories so people could, get on their side and all that. Now, obviously, because my parents were a prayer people, right? Their faith wasn't moving left and right. It wasn't shaky at all because they knew God will come through. But for a church point of view, because I guess, quote unquote, they wanted to add different spice to it, they started going after my brother and I. I remember we were called names. I still remember. I was serving as a choir member for adult service, and I was sitting in the back, and one of the ladies who started all this thing, I was really crying because I knew that was the last day that I would see my father at this church preaching, right? So it really bothered me, so I started crying. But I remember this lady looked at me and was like, "That little crazy boy." She didn't literally say that. She said on the bad word, but I can't repeat it in a church. But basically, that's what she said. And it hurt me so much. And there's just awful things that happened to my brother and I. We got physically abused sometimes. It was just bad. I mean, you would think this is the modern church, but believe it or not, things do happen. And I remember walking out of church and I said, if I go back to church ever, that's the day I'll die. And to be honest, I mean, normally for testimony, there are some things that I wanted to hide, but like I'll go and share. Up until this day, my brother still has a hard time going to church. He believes in God, but he just can't be in the church because of all these memories it brings back. And that was same for me too as well. So what happened was, instead of leaving right away, my father said, I'm going to pray for about a month, and let's see what God has to say. And after a month, he came up with the answer from God saying, church shouldn't be broken up. That's not what church is. There shouldn't be an argument, right? So she said, if there's a better pastor who would come here to serve you guys, maybe that's the God's plan. So he stepped down. He stepped down. For those of you, I mean, I guess it's true with everyone else, but as far as pastors are concerned, when they don't preach, there's nothing else they could really do outside of that. So what do? We packed up everything, and then we decided to come down to Richmond, because that's where our in-laws and extended family were at the time. So for the next 10 years, that was our desert life, right? That's when I came here to serve, right? But to be honest, if I confess now, I hated coming here. Not because it's arcade, but the fact that what I experienced outside of here. Not only that, my parents and I, and same thing with my brother, we cleaned buildings for 10 years. That's where I met Elder James Pack, because we used to clean Dominion Powers. And we used to clean just the third floor, but third floor by itself, if you clean it up, it takes average about 6 hours to do it every day. It's big, you know. And, you know, because of the income, of course, my father cleaned buildings from 7 in the morning all the way to 12, and because of the physical physicality of my mom, she only did it about 9 to 12. I'll come home from school, pick my brother up, and we would go start from about 5 o'clock all the way to 11 or 12, every day in our lives, right? And through that, I'm thinking, what in the world is this? You know, because I thought that, especially if your father is a pastor, especially if he's a man of God, I thought God's gonna take care of us. What is this? Now I'm picking on people's trash. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying cleaning up building is wrong, but for me, at that age, like being in high school and being moved around so much, dealing with all this stuff, I just didn't know what was going on, right? So what do? I spent more time with music ever, because it was, again, my only way out. You know, luckily, you know, I was able to do well in music, so, you know, I started giving concerts here and there and stuff, and everybody's like, man, this guy's gonna end up somewhere else, right? And that didn't really help my life, because of the fact that it helped me to grow my ego a lot. If I remember, that was my junior in high school in summer. I went to New York to perform, and I came down. They said, well, there's a teacher from Juilliard wanted to see you, right? But I had a problem with my arm, so I just stopped playing. So I switched my role to playing music to writing music. So I wrote a bunch of music. I went to Juilliard, I went to Oberlin, all the major universities in music. They're like, we got you. Okay, I think you could come in. But what happened was, I don't know about in the other field, but in the field of art, there's so much teacher politics. There's so much teacher politics. So I got caught in that. So it got to the point where it says, if you don't come to our church, I'm not supporting you anymore. I mean, if you don't come to our school, I'm not supporting you anymore, right? That's what happened, right? I picked one school, but the teachers got into argument, this and that. All 3 major schools decided to drop me because they got so fed up with fighting. So I think I'm the only person that I know around as my friends are concerned, who got acceptance letter 1 week, and who got the letter saying, we're not going to accept you a week after. I remember sitting in my room just crying, because I thought obviously that was the way out for me, for my family. Because honestly, I didn't want to be around my family, because I was so tired of seeing my parents being ill all the time. They had to work all the time, no matter what. My brother at the time wasn't a troublemaker or anything, but
he didn't have a father figure, you know, because my father was out all the time. So my brother had some rough time, and I had to act like a father, but of course, little did I know, I didn't know how to act around it too. But it was just rough. So that music school was only the way out. But that didn't happen, so I thought, wow, God must really, really hate me. And I remember sitting in my room and thinking, God, why did you save me if you wanted me to go through all this? Why, right? Why? So for the next 6 months, I stopped going to church. I said, I'm so fed up with this. I'm not going. I think God is not real. I think this is just sellout business. Yes, I'm sorry to say that because my father is a pastor. I just don't want anything to do with church. Okay? So what did I do? I started visiting all the universities again. And I started talking to teachers. And I'm showing them, hey, look, I didn't get accepted because of these reasons. Here are my products. Can you judge me? Right? And from there, now that I know God was working then for me, even though I thought that it was happening because of my talent, God started to working me again from then. Although I didn't realize. Because what happened was, I started meeting all these people in the field of music. You know? It was just like full of people from jazz, from classical. And it got to the point where from Korea, if there's some like 유학생 there who's coming from Korea to find out about the music school, they would call me saying, hey, could you hook me up with so-and-so teacher for a lesson? And on average, I would make a month about like $5,000 a month just hooking up people here and there. And that's how God used me for that particular season of my life. But I didn't know that. I just thought it was happening because I'm really good. right? That's how whole music thing started. And my back in high school teacher, his name is Glenn Caldwell. He's a judge panel. He's a regional judge panel for American Idol, and he also does music for Stevie Wonders and all these people. He started going, hey, why don't you come work for me? Work for me. So that's how I started working in the music field. So I actually got into business about 4 years before I actually went back to school. That's, again, where I met lots of people. But that's when I started going even farther away from God. Because you know, everything you see on TV about artists and all that isn't what you think it is. There's so much drug involved, worldly thing involved, and I was certainly heavily influenced by that too, right? I used to work this music company called Stomp Music, and their gift for contract was, you know, we call it 공공칠 가방, right? Those carrier 가방. They would put a whole bunch of cash in it. And then another bag, they'll be full of like, you know, all the videos and, you know, the drugs on the other bag. That's their gifts. Right. At age of 18, 19, I was carrying those cases around. Why? Because I was just like, I earned these. I mean, those were the symbols of you made it. Right? And I was probably carrying around. Right? And more I got involved with those things. Why? Because through that, I met these like unbelievable people they call in the world, right? And I went back to school after that. You know, luckily I got accepted to school after 4 years, and I went back, but my ego was just going off the roof. You know, my parents would always. There was a period of time when they didn't talk to me for 2 years because they saw how messed up I was living as far as my life is concerned. But my entire reason for living that way is because I wanted to prove to God that I could live this life without Him. I wanted to prove to God, God, you messed up my life, so here's my own way of living out. That was my only reason. People were praising me left and right. They had nothing to do with my talent, but somehow people were just saying all these stuff. And I'm like, see, I don't need God. I don't need God. Right? But by the time when I left with the from college, I've gotten arrested about 5 times because of possession of drugs. It was just crazy, right? It was just so crazy. But I thought it was cool because why? That's the sign of me saying I made it, right? And again, my goal was to prove to God, God, you messed up my life. This is how I'm going to pay you back. Which meant I still acknowledge God for who He is. But at the same time, I was sort of, sending this invitation to go to war against God. That's what I was doing. But that's what I was doing. But there was one incident before I left Cleveland, that's where I was last, that changed my entire life. What happened was, again, I told you I got caught in the possession of drug, and cops handcuffed me. And I'm sitting back in the police car, and I see this young kid. I'm not even lying. She's at the time she's about like 8-year-old, I think. It's one, really pretty little 8-year-old girl. Somehow I was walking next to the police car, and she comes to me and she says, "Can I pray for you?" I said, "You've been bad." So can you imagine me being in the police car, handcuffed like this, and a little American girl coming up to me and saying, "Can I pray for you?" And her prayer was really simple. It says, "God, I don't know this boy, but help him." That was her prayer. And through that, something started in my heart again saying, "Hey, I need to go back to fix something." It's not that I have to fix it, but I need to really, really take it up to God again. Like again, I wasn't like, saying, "Oh, I'm okay with God now." I wasn't saying that, but something told me that you need to take it up to God. If you believe that God messed you up, why did you take it up to Him? Why did you do all these other things, right? Something started in me, in my heart. So there I am in the police station. My parents drove 9 hours. They left 11 o'clock at night. They got there like 6, 7 in the morning. Came, and somehow, I was released after 2 days. And my parents took me, brought me back here, in the car ride back here, not over. Right? I didn't know what to say to them. And by the time we got home, first thing my dad said, "Hey, it has nothing to do with me being a pastor." Because my father used to always tell me, before me being a pastor, I'm a man of God, and I'm a father. So when we got home, the first thing he said was, "I raised you wrong." Right? And after that, what he did was, "Here, go read this." So he gave me this Bible with engraved my name on it. He said, "Go read it." I was like, "What?" I'm thinking, "You're not going to punish me?" He's like, No, go read it, go read it. But my mom wanted to add a little more spice in it. She said, "You're going to stay in your room. You can't come out. Anytime you're allowed to come out is when you have to go to the bathroom or when you have to go eat." And her reason was that it's not only for myself, but if I do go out to meet other friends, right? She was afraid that I would have a bad influence on that. So she said, "Don't go. Just stay in the room." So that happened about 6 months. So at first I'm thinking, man, I'm not gonna read this. Why would I read this? Typical, like, really, really baby step faith kind of, thing for anyone to say this. I've already tried this.